It is a pleasure to be here today. I'm president of local media for Cablevision, and I'll turn more to that in a minute. But what I'd like to do is say a word about Group M as a sort of a context-setting thing. One of the things we at Cablevision like most about Group M is they have three qualities. They're just plain smart. They're bold. They like to lean forward, and we admire that. And frankly, one quality we like a lot less than perhaps you clients of Group M do, which is they represent your interests very well. They're constantly raising the bar on us, and they do that very well. And what you're going to see today is actually not a sales pitch for Cablevision. It's actually an education pitch for all of us. And what that is how do we think about the data in a way that can essentially elevate and make more effective and more efficient your own marketing efforts. Beginning in November of 2012 through March of 2013, Cablevision embarked on a new strategy, which was to begin to aggregate set-top box data from all 7 million boxes. And this is and the effect of that, by the way, to give you a sense for what that means, the traditional measurement options inside our footprint are several hundred boxes. So what you're going to see is a granularity and a picture and a mosaic, if you will, that is really groundbreaking. The findings are pretty clear. First, that the tuning audience, and I'll define tuning in just a moment, is highly fragmented. Second, that cable networks outperform broadcast networks in total audience, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Off-prime day parts, it's rather surprise to us, have both a large and an attractive audience. And finally, the tuning hours are highly skewed among households. There's some that simply can't get enough television, and there's some that it's very difficult to get them to turn it on. The implications of this for marketers are that television tuning behavior is not dissimilar in some ways. There are strong leitmotifs between television tuning behavior and internet behavior. And what I mean by that is there are long tails, there are communities, there are verticals of interest, and you'll see some of those in just a minute. That the television can be a highly targeted medium. It doesn't have to be broadcast, it can be very specific. That the advertising inventory can be purchased, very similar to internet inventory. You can buy it on a CPM basis, buying just the impressions that you want, floating throughout the day. When the box lights up, the impression gets dropped. And finally, I believe that it will become a more competitive medium as more and more of this scales over time. One important thing that we take very seriously at Cablevision, and frankly we take very seriously in the industry, is that consumer privacy is a top commitment. None of this entails personally identifiable information being disclosed to anyone. Any sort of matching of lists or anything else is done on a double-blind basis. And in fact, Cablevision went out and hired a third-party auditor not only to attest to the accuracy of the processes that we have that develop and the veracity of the information we produce, but in fact to ensure that consumer privacy is protected along each step of the way. We take it very seriously, and we know that Group M does too. Let's look at some of the data. You don't need to see the network names. Just look at the curve. What's amazing to me, and I'll take to give you a sense, the very first bar is CBS, and it's 5.3%. The way to think about that is that 5.3% of all of the tuning hours in the month of November were on the CBS network, 5.3%. But what's fascinating to me is that even down here, number 40, which is Spike TV, still has measurable tuning. And what's even more interesting to me is that if you carry it out a couple of hundred networks deeper, you'll find that even network number 100 here has measurable reach, measurable viewing. We found that in the case of November, of the top 100 networks in reach, it was only about 4/5 of the total tuning. Think about that. That means 20% of the total tuning was not in the top 100 networks. Even in this sophisticated audience, to get you all to think about 2 or 3 networks that aren't in our top 100 in reach would be a challenge. Another way to think about it, though, when you step back, is what is the dispersion of hours between prime and non-prime, broadcast and cable. Let's do prime versus non-prime first. On the left, the orange part of the bar is the primetime audience, and that's 25% of the total viewing. The blue bar represents 75% of the viewing, and that's non-prime. In other words, 75% of the total tuning in the month of November for us was on non-prime. When you have set-top box data, you can find lots and lots of viewers in significant pockets up and down the dial, significant periods of the day, all day long, that are available, but that you wouldn't know if you use the traditional measurement. What you see here, and again, notice you don't need to know the names of the networks. Look at the curve. What this curve shows is the average number of hours among the top 40 reach networks that a household had the television running in the month of November. Let's give you an example. The first one here is CBS. In the month of November, if the household had CBS on at all in the month of November, on average, it had it on for 15 hours. That's how to read that. Interestingly, this chart was, shall we say, triaged first by reach. If I change the chart, eliminate the reach number, some surprising things happen. And this goes to the second sort of theme, not just long tails, but in fact deep verticals. What this chart is, and I'll read some of these to you in just 1 second. This chart is a different cut on the data. What this says is forget about reach. Let's just look at all of the networks and find the ones where the engagement is highest. I think it's probably useful to turn then and look at one of the challenges when you're marketing in terms of frequency. How would you begin to think about applying some of these techniques? One option is looking at the average daily tuning hours per household. Now what you see in this chart is we divided the Cablevision footprint into 5 households, quintiles, if you will, of tuning from left to right. And these are the very light households. They watch on average 1 hour per day. And the very heavy households watch on hours, hold on to your seatbelt, an astonishing 16 hours per day that the set-top box is being tuned. By the way, notice that it may sound crazy until you realize the average number of boxes over here is 3. So you've got multiple houses, single house, multiple set-top boxes running. This is broadcast ratings on the Cablevision system using set-top boxes. It starts at midnight, declines overnight, builds through the day, peaks out roughly prime time. So this is just broadcast only, ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox. The curve should look familiar. It builds. Clearly the prime time is significantly more viewing during the middle of the day. Let's add the top 20 cable networks to it. You see exactly, by the way, the same looking curve. The curve is the same, but the initially startling thing should be I've just added the top 20 cable networks and gotten essentially double the set-top box ratings. In other words, the top 20 cable networks have the same ratings as all of the broadcast networks at prime time combined. Let's add the rest of the cable networks, and it triples. An enormous audience is over here, even if you exclude the top 10 cable networks. An enormous audience is over here, even at prime time. If you are promoting a new television show or a new television network, you can not only advertise to exactly the folks you want and just the folks you want, you can actually discern whether they showed up. Key thing here is how did we know? How did we know the conversion was what it was? And that's the miracle of the great data, because you can actually do matchback analyses in automotive using a lot of different types of data. So we're very encouraged. We think Group M is on the cutting edge. We are very particularly excited about what it means for you all as this scales. And I know that even now, Mike Bologna can tell you how to do that. So thank you very much.